A few weeks ago when I was at Target, I was surprised to see that they had 55-inch flat screen televisions on sale for just under $200 before taxes. Just 12 years ago, I bought my first flat screen television, which was 46 inches, for $350. And revisiting the 1994 Best Buy ad that's featured on Twisted Sifter, we can see that a 46-inch television in 1994 was roughly $1,500, which would be roughly $3,200 today when we adjust for inflation. This Sears Christmas catalog from 1990 lists a 46-inch Magnavox television for roughly $2,600, which would be just shy of $6,000 today when adjusting for inflation. And 50-plus inch televisions in this Sears Christmas catalog start around $3,000. And it's not just televisions that have been getting better and more affordable over the last few decades. According to the Federal Reserve for Economic Data, consumer prices on toys have gradually declined over the last few decades. And you'll notice a similar trend when you compare prices on toys in this Sears Christmas catalog from 1990 to comparable toys today. 24-inch Huffy mountain bikes were listed for $130 in the 1990 Sears Christmas catalog, which would be the equivalent of roughly $300 in 2023. And if you visit Walmart's website today, you can find 24-inch Huffy mountain bikes for under $100. Prices on board games like Sorry, Monopoly, and Scattergories are also priced lower than they were in the 1990 Sears Christmas catalog. In 1990, the Sega Genesis was the state-of-the-art video game console and was listed for $189, the equivalent of roughly $434 in 2023. Today, you can find a brand new Nintendo Switch for roughly $300, and individual games are much more affordable today when you adjust for inflation. In fact, you can now access many of the same Sega Genesis games that were listed between $50 and $60 in 1990, either through an annual Nintendo Online membership, or you could also buy a collection disc for roughly $30. And other toys like remote control cars, and Legos, and basketballs, and Barbie dolls are more affordable today than they were in 1990 when you factor in inflation. Even artificial Christmas trees are priced lower today than they were in the 1990 Sears Christmas catalog. Now you might be asking yourself, why am I comparing prices on toys today to prices on toys from 1990? Am I trying to obfuscate the inflation that we've been experiencing since COVID? Inflation that is largely a result of adding trillions of new dollars to an economy that's trying to recover from lockdowns and supply chain disruptions on top of trade restrictions? Well, if you want more on that topic, I've made multiple videos on inflation over the last few years. Although, even with the holidays, the COVID inflation is often exaggerated. Like when former Representative Jason Chaffetz was on TV before Thanksgiving complaining about how he spent $90 on a turkey.
I mean, we went to go buy a turkey today. It was $90 for a turkey.
And yet, I was able to get my hands on a 17-pound butterball bird for $33 at a store where there were cheaper options available. I just find Butterball pretty reliable when it comes to quality. Anyway, I picked the year 1990 because that's the same year that the Christmas classic Home Alone was released. Because now in the year 2023, many of the nostalgia economists are looking back fondly at Home Alone and the good old days of 1990, as if the average American in 1990 was living like the McAllisters. Some people have said that the McAllisters probably paid something like $250,000 for their house, although it's getting increasingly difficult to tell whether or not people are joking when they make points like this. Many have begun to satirize this trend of pointing to old TV shows and movies to suggest that life was much better in the past, with people using the Flintstones as an example of when times were better. Either way, the McAllister house is a real house, which according to Realtor.com sold for $875,000 in 1989, which would be roughly $2.2 million today when adjusting for inflation. Today, the house is estimated to be worth around $2.3 million according to Zillow. Then there's the fact that the McAllister family was able to afford annual travel plans for the holidays, although some have pointed out that the Paris trip in the first movie was covered by Kevin's uncle. But in Home Alone 2, according to Uncle Frank, Papa Peter McAllister paid good money for the family vacation to Florida. Add to this the fact that the McAllisters managed to rebook flights for a family of like 9 or 10 people from Florida to New York on last-minute notice so that the family could be with Kevin in New York City on Christmas Day, seemingly not uncomfortable with the additional costs. Not to mention that the adults fly first class in these movies. There's also been speculation over the years over what exactly the McAllisters do to afford a rather nice life in the early 1990s. This article from Screen Rant reports, based on the novelization of Home Alone, that Peter McAllister is a prominent businessman and that Kate McAllister is a fashion designer, the latter of which is perhaps illustrated with the collection of mannequins around the McAllister house. So maybe it's the case that the McAllisters were not exactly a bunch of average Joes. This would be like watching an episode of Saved by the Bell and assuming that the average American family in the early 1990s was shelling out $4,000, $9,000 inflation adjusted, on their kid's cell phone. Or watching an episode of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and assuming that the average American family in the 1990s could afford a full-time butler. And then there's this article from Breitbart that reports that Americans are shocked to find out how cheaper groceries were in the movie Home Alone, as Kevin McAllister was able to purchase milk and a loaf of bread and laundry detergent and dryer sheets and macaroni and cheese and cling wrap and a Stouffer's TV dinner and toilet paper and orange juice and a pack of toy army men for the low cost of $19.83. Breitbart cites this news segment where a reporter goes to a store in Chicago and finds out that all of these items would now cost over $72.
Woo! We are a long way away from 30 years ago and Kevin McAllister only paying $19.83.
Conservative influencer Alex Clark of Turning Point USA promoted this, saying that all this inflation as a result of Biden's economic agenda makes her sick. Yeah, I guess all of the added money and deficit spending and shenanigans that happened under the Trump administration doesn't count. How convenient. So I decided to add all of these same items to a cart on Walmart's website, adjusting the pickup location to a supercenter in Chicago, and I found that the total came out to $36.21. So roughly half of the $72 figure from the news report, which is also cheaper than 1990 when you adjust for inflation, and is also a lower percentage of the median personal income in the United States when compared to 1990. But I will say there are some things to look back fondly on when watching Home Alone. For example, the people in the Home Alone universe treated shoplifting as a serious crime.
Shoplifter!
And I know what you might be thinking, Kevin McAllister only stole one toothbrush. What's the big deal? Well, try living in a city where you have to ask a store associate to grab a key to unlock the dental hygiene section of the store because your city and state has gone soft on prosecuting retail theft.
Look what you did, you little jerk!